We had to start this video out with a meme. Satyr Shah went out there and tweeted this last night. Chris Tanev watching Nikita Zadorov and the Vancouver Canucks win. And it is the Squidward staring out the window at SpongeBob and Patrick having fun meme. This is perfect application, and the reason for this is because yesterday we had talked about Vancouver Canucks hockey, how Nikita Zadorov went over, how the Vancouver Canucks won, and also we had made a video about how Chris Tanev on the Calgary Flames legitimately thought that he was gonna be a Canuck again. You thought, buddy, but nah, it didn't happen. He is still a Flame at the time of recording this audio, but turns out Vancouver is not the only Canadian team that has gone out there, has asked about Tanev, and that has pursued him heavily. Let's go over the profile, let's go over the updates, let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then we'll wrap this video up. Chris Tanev is a 33-year-old defenseman, right-handed guy, 6'2", 196, signed till the end of this season making $4.5 million a year. He has been one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL in terms of being able to shut down plays, in terms of being able to read the opposition when they're cycling it in the defensive zone, in terms of blocking shots. Chris Tanev has been an absolute warrior. Now, you could say that the past few years he has been made of glass. It's why in Vancouver, he never had an 82-game season. He did have a full 69-game season in 2019-20, but then that year was cut short because of the virus. He only had one full 82-game season, though, played with the Calgary Flames a year after. He had 28 points in 82 games, so he actually went out there and started producing a bit more. Give it a few years, though, and Tanev now has 7 points in 24 games. He is on pace for about 24 points again, but realistically, you're not getting Chris Tanev, you're not trading for Chris Tanev because he produces points. You're getting him because he's a reliable, shutdown option. Now, you could say that for Tanev, he may not be the same guy now that he used to be, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago, when he was arguably the best defensive defenseman in the league. Maybe nowadays things are a bit different. He is 33 now, so heading into the future, it may not be the most projectable thing to say, hey, this guy's going to be still like one of the best shutdown defensemen, block shots kind of guy. I mean, he blocked a shot the other night with his face, and that resulted in him missing a little bit of time. He's a warrior. Chris Tanev is. And when it comes to teams that are going out there and talking about him, we had ourselves the Toronto Maple Leafs actually being one of the big ones. In fact, we had ourselves a few tweets made. This is what Elliotte Friedman said on the intermission yesterday, that the Toronto Maple Leafs made a pitch for both Tanev and Zadorov at the same time. The issue was they wanted the Flames to retain 50% on both players and could not come to an agreement on that trade, let alone compensation for what these guys would cost. So not only could the Toronto Maple Leafs not figure out what to send Calgary in return, but they also couldn't really agree on Calgary retaining 50% on both players. $4.5 million a year for Chris Tanev is not necessarily the cheapest thing in the world, but because the Toronto Maple Leafs have so much cap locked up into other players, they could not have been able to get Chris Tanev at the full $4.5 mil per season. However, even though this has been the case, even though we have Friedman saying that the Leafs made a pitch for both Tanev and Zadorov, we had ourselves even more conversations regarding what's going on. Here's another tweet made by Leafs Season. It tweets out about the Elliotte Friedman 32 Thoughts podcast. Friedman on the pod says that one defenseman the Leafs will still go hard at is Chris Tanev. The Leafs believe they can keep him past this season. So there you go. Toronto is still going out there targeting these former Vancouver Canucks, these former Calgary Flames defensemen. They did it with Giordano. They may be doing it with Tanev. And Elliotte Friedman is saying he thinks the Leafs are still going to go out there and do that. In fact, this conversation has gotten so big that we have articles being written about it. Here's a report from 6 hours ago, David Alter on the Hockey News. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and listen, or not listen, but read this report. The Maple Leafs continue to pursue Flames Chris Tanev. More learned about the failed trade to acquire him and Nikita Zadorov. In his latest 32 Thoughts segment on Hockey Night in Canada, Sportsnet Elliot Friedman, he added to Kevin Week's report from earlier in the week about Toronto's bid to try to acquire Nikita Zadorov and Chris Tanev. Here's the quote. From what I understand, the issue here is that the Maple Leafs and Flames could not agree on what it would cost for Calgary to keep up to 50% of the salary of both players. I don't know what the exact percentage was that Toronto asked, but it was up to 50%, and the two sides could not figure out the compensation in addition to the compensation for the players. Here is the extra quote here. I do think the Toronto Maple Leafs prefer right-shot defensemen, and they're looking for someone with a bit of an edge, he said of Tanev. The Leafs are also awaiting clarity on John Klingberg's status. The defenseman is on LTIR as he deals with a lingering hip injury. Toronto also has themselves an interesting situation. Friedman talked about this in the show, but they do have quite a few defensemen who are missing out on time, and so because Chris Tanev is a readily available, defensively capable guy, this has been the name tossed out for the past few days, it seems like. And now you have yourselves articles like this. Also, I'm going to leave a link in the description if you want to read this one from Luke Fox. Quick shifts. Why the Maple Leafs should be all over a Chris Tanev trade. Let's move the page over just a little bit there. Luke Fox published this yesterday. He's got a few thoughts as to why this should go down. It talks about Nikita Zadorov. It talks about the trade with Vancouver. This trade taught us that no, it's not too early for the Flames to make deals on their impending UFAs. Now, the Zadorov situation was unique in that the defenseman very publicly begged out, which no doubt caused some measure of distraction or discontent in a dressing room trying to come together and claw back into the playoff race. There will be less urgency for Craig Conroy to make decisions on Tanev, Hanifin, and Lindholm. With 3 regular defensemen out of the picture in Toronto, the Maple Leafs should zero in on a Tanev homecoming. Said Leafs GM Brad Treliving at the top of the week on trading for defense, you have people probably playing higher and more minutes than you want, and they're hanging in there, but it's certainly an area we'd like to look and see if there's a way to help ourselves. Tanev would be more in demand and therefore more expensive than Zadorov, but he's precisely the type of heart and soul defender the Leafs need. The right shot can help stabilize playmaking lefty Morgan Rielly or eat 19 minutes of tough defensive assignments in a shutdown role next to, let's say, Jake McCabe. Did we mention he blocks shots with his freaking face? Tanev would instantly improve a mediocre penalty kill and take on pressure-packed D-zone starts. And then it goes out there and asks a few other questions as to other guys you might be thinking about. Boquist, Peak, Borgen, Walker, Labushkin. With Brody coming off the books at season's end, Treliving would be enticed to make Tanev more than a rental. Wanting a player and getting a player are different animals, of course. Kiprios brought up an interesting point on Friday's Real Kipper and Bourne show that despite the great relationship between Conroy and Treliving, Flames ownership might not be excited to do the Leafs GM any favors after his wanting out of Calgary. Still, when it comes to a team in need and a player who fits, Tanev is the best and most obvious target for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there you go. There's a whole bunch of material about this. Chris Tanev being the main guy that the Toronto Maple Leafs are still going after, that they would still want, that is maybe secondary to what Nikita Zadorov was going for, not because Zadorov is a better player per se, but because Zadorov wanted out and because there was already a really public thing going on there. Chris Tanev has really only been involved in these rumors because his name is tossed out there, not really because he himself has asked for a trade or anything. The Leafs are reportedly targeting Chris Tanev in the trade. This is the J-Fresh player card, 98 percentile wins above replacement, and a 100 percentile defense player. He is still one of the best defensive defensemen in the entire NHL, and if Toronto Maple Leafs go out there and acquire this guy, it would be a pretty good get in my opinion. Sure, you could debate whether or not he's as effective as he was when he was in Vancouver, but still, Tan Man has himself a skill set that is very unique and that is tough to replicate amongst anybody else. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Chris Tanev going over to the Toronto Maple Leafs? How do you feel about these updates that the Leafs are still trying to go for it? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.